top 10 terrifying reasons NASA doesn't want us to visit Mars. Number 10. Your rocket could blow up before leaving Earth. Yep. You heard that right. The trip to Mars is just as hard as being there. Elon Musk's plan to go to Mars involves strapping a giant spaceship atop the biggest rocket that humanity has ever built. Because any rocket launch basically involves a long controlled explosion, no matter how many safety tests are done beforehand, there is always a risk. If anything goes wrong, if the explosion gets out of control, the people trapped in that big container of fuel don't stand a chance. For context, NASA's Space Shuttle program carried 833 passengers between 1981 and 2011. Of those, 14 people died in explosions in 2 high-profile accidents, a fatality rate of 1.6%. That's more dangerous than driving, and it's even a bit riskier than climbing Mount Everest. I don't really think NASA wants us to trust SpaceX, and I don't blame them considering a couple of SpaceX's smaller Falcon 9 rockets have either exploded on the launch pad or blown up mid-flight. Number 9. Radiation exposure. For the entirety of the journey to Mars and back, astronauts are likely to endure much higher exposure to radiation than they would on Earth. Outer space is filled with high-energy particles blasted out by the sun and other stars. Here on Earth, we're protected by our planet's magnetic field, which deflects them away. But once you leave Earth, you'll be exposed. When NASA sent the Curiosity rover to Mars, it found that a one-way trip alone would expose unshielded astronauts an extra 0.3 sieverts of radiation, equivalent to 24 CAT scans. To put in perspective, that's 15 times the annual radiation limit for workers at nuclear power plants. Now, what happens if the sun erupts and sends a major solar flare hurtling towards the spaceship mid-flight? In that case, the astronauts could be exposed to much higher, potentially fatal doses, and these flares are unpredictable. Now, this issue just doesn't go away when you get to Mars, oh no. Because the planet has no ozone layer and a weak magnetic field, any humans on the surface would be pelleted with both cosmic and UV rays from the sun at a far higher doses than they get on Earth. Odds are people on Mars would have to spend a good chunk of time indoors, perhaps even underground, shielding their habitat with layers of dirt, and at that point, what would even be the point of being there, you know? Number 8. You could crash on Mars. The hard part of getting to Mars is the landing. Under Elon Musk's plan, your spaceship would be approaching Mars at 62,000 miles per hour. As it descends into the atmosphere, the ship would then use supersonic retro propulsion, aka lots of little rockets firing at once, in order to land on the surface of Mars. This landing maneuver is risky because Mars's atmosphere is much thinner than Earth is, so there's less friction to slow you down. NASA has struggled to even land small robots on the surface. The system used to decelerate and then parachute the Curiosity rover on Mars was mind-boggling. And the Curiosity only weighed 1 ton, and Elon is envisioning 450 tons. Plenty could go wrong. Number 7. Your spacesuit or habitat could leak. Anyone planning a trip to Mars will obviously have to prepare for the fact there aren't ready supplies of food, water, and oxygen. You can pack enough food and water, and humans could invent machines to break apart the carbon dioxide on Mars and yield oxygen, but the real danger is with accidents. A spacesuit or habitat could tear, causing a loss of air. Mars is filled with dust and dirt that's likely to get everywhere. If any of it clogs a crucial seal and causes leaks, people could, well, die. Accidents there could mean life or death, and accidents happen all the time, but you can't afford for them to happen there, which you can't guarantee. Number 6. We can't grow food there. At the moment, astronauts at the International Space Station are not able to grow a sufficient amount of food to sustain themselves, even if some experiments are taking place. Every food they eat comes from Earth in a dehydrated or irradiated form. If a mission to Mars takes place, astronauts won't be able to carry with them the amount of food needed for such a long mission. Therefore, they will need to learn how to grow their own food. If this is already hard in the spaceship, in a microgravity environment, it's even harder on the surface of Mars. Its soil is alkaline and needs decontamination to be used to grow plants, and NASA isn't even sure that that will work. And you kinda need food to live, so this is scary. Number 5. Potential sources of energy are low. How will we create energy on the surface of Mars? Well, it's much harder than it is on Earth. Mars is further away from the sun, therefore solar power is only 40% as effective as on Earth and can be even lower in cases of dust storms. Wind power won't be useful as there's almost no atmosphere, and geothermal energy won't work as Mars is much colder than Earth. Now, Elon Musk suggested that we might one day power a Martian civilization with solar panels or geothermal. This is what he said. If you have energy on Mars, you're gonna have water because there's massive amounts of ice. He also hinted at the possibility of terraforming Mars, releasing huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere to warm the planet and bring back liquid water, making it habitable for humans. If we could warm Mars up, we would once again have a thick atmosphere and warm oceans, he said. But this seems to be wishful thinking. Number 4. Low gravity can ruin your bones and muscles. This is something you never see in any movies, but the lower gravity on Mars is potentially one of the biggest concerns, says Chris. Here's what he means. We know that humans do fine in Earth's gravity, but on the other hand, we know that human bones and muscles can atrophy terribly in zero gravity, as seen in experiments on the International Space Station. Astronauts on the ISS have to exercise for 2 hours a day to prevent muscle loss, but their bones will still lose calcium over time, and they don't recover until they come back to Earth. What we don't know is how the human body will react on Mars, where gravity is only about 0.38 the strength of Earth. Many people have long assumed that humans can survive just fine in Martian gravity. It'll be just like Earth, only we can jump a little higher. But we don't actually know this is for a fact, Chris says. It might turn out that low Martian gravity is just as bad for human health as zero gravity. Mars's low gravity may also erode other capabilities that are crucial for everyday functioning. For instance, NASA has found that eyesight can mysteriously deteriorate in zero gravity. Astronaut John Phillips went from perfect 20/20 to 2100 after just 6 months aboard the ISS. Astronauts also find it harder to sleep in zero gravity, and many passengers in space suffer from insomnia. The trickiest part is that we won't really know what to expect until we actually send humans to Mars. Number 3. You could get poisoned. Sand and dirt on Mars is definitely a problem. Mars periodically gets massive sandstorms that spread out across the planet and can last for days or weeks at a time, and let me tell you, you don't want to go outside during one. All of those little particles flying around could tear a hole in your spacesuit, or they could clog door seals, mess up machinery, or even cover up solar panels, depriving astronauts of power for extended periods. A related concern is the fact that Martian soil is toxic. It contains very high concentrations of perchlorates, salts that can do serious damage to the human thyroid gland. It's okay to touch Martian dirt with your bare hands, but you really don't want any of it to get into your drinking water or food when you tramp it into your habitat. You also don't want to grow plants using Martian soil. Now, we're pretty sure there's no life on Mars, no strange microorganisms lurking in the soil, but we're not absolutely sure. So it might be a good idea to test out any proposed landing site in advance in case there's anything harmful lurking. And that worry goes both ways. We'll want to be careful about contaminating or killing any Martian life too. The 1967 Outer Space Treaty forbids the harmful contamination of alien worlds with our earthly microbes. Number 2. You will be stuck with who you go with. One of the greatest challenges NASA is working through in preparation for a Mars mission is making sure crew members don't grow to hate each other. After all, they'll be together for many months on end, far away from their home planet, isolated from their friends, intensely bored, and lacking much personal space. First, researchers have found that there are definitely people out there with the sort of personalities needed for long space missions. Between 2007 and 2011, the Mars 500 project enlisted 6-person crews for various lengths of time to simulate a Mars mission at a facility in Moscow. The final mission, lasting 520 days, went smoothly, no conflicts, everyone got along, which is great, but it was a simulation, and the trouble is that we don't know if psychologists can reliably screen for the right personalities every single time. And it doesn't take much for chaos to arise. For example, during the Biosphere 2 project in 1994, the 7-person crew eventually split into warring factions, and the mission had to end prematurely. Now that's an extreme example, but it underscores the fact that the first crew to Mars will need to get along and keep keep their feelings under control. Because in this situation, roommate drama could be life or death. And coming in at number 1, help can only reach Mars every 2 years. The biggest challenge to go to Mars is the time duration to go there and come back. The window for a launch to Mars from Earth only happens approximately every 2 years and 2 months. This means astronauts leaving in 2024 would be able to get help before 2026 when the next launch window opens, and the help gets there after the 9-month journey. This time window makes it even harder by creating a mission of a very long duration. So if you somehow run out of supplies or have a huge issue you can't fix, you're just out of luck.